Heat race number 1 for the Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions. Night number 2 of the historical big one here at Eldora Speedway. 8 laps, top 5 cars to the A-main. Here's the way they line up. Starting on the pole, car number 18C, Brian Carlson. Alongside of him, Danny Smith. Then Steve Suever and Lee Brewer, Tyler Walker and Dean Jacobs, Tim Allison and Jimmy Stinson and Rusty McClure. Green flag has fallen. Brian Carlson out to the early lead. His wing collapses. Trouble in turn number 2. All the cars manage to get by. Yellow flag is out on the speedway. Now Steve Suever and Danny Smith on row number 1 as they approach the chalk stripe in turn 4. The green flag flies once again. Danny Smith in car number 4 on the top of the speedway jumps out to the lead in turns 1 and 2. Steve Suever running second. Tyler Walker's up to third. Here comes Lee Brewer into the picture right now as well. Danny Smith in front with Steve Suever second. Tyler Walker third. Lee Brewer runs fourth. Brewer down to the bottom of the speedway, going to try to slide up in front of Tyler Walker. Lee Brewer takes over third spot in Dean Lindsay's number 2D. Walker now to the bottom of the speedway, but he can't make up any ground on third place. Now Dean Jacobs moves to the bottom of the speedway, pulls alongside of Tyler Walker down the back straightaway. Dean Jacobs comes into fourth spot. Danny Smith continues to lead off of turn number 4. Steve Suever second. Third spot belongs to the 2D of Lee Brewer. Fourth to Dean Jacobs. Fifth and final transfer spot right now to the 11 of Tim Allison. Danny Smith with a 10-car length advantage as they go down the back straightaway over Steve Suever, Lee Brewer, Dean Jacobs, and Tim Allison. White flag waves at the flag stand this time. One more trip around the high bank half mile. A little bit of smoke coming out of second place Steve Suever. Lee Brewer's going to try to make a move for second at the checkered flag. Danny Smith picks up the victory. Very close at the finish line. I think the second spot went to Lee Brewer. Steve Suever third. Dean Jacobs fourth. Fifth and final transfer spot to the 11 of Tim Allison. Danny Smith in the Kiger Sunoco number 4 picks up the win in heat race number 1 for the Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions. Heat race number 2 for the Frigidaire All-Stars. Once again, 8 laps the distance. Top 5 finishers transfer to the A-main. Dale Blaney in car number 94 sits on the pole. Alongside of him, the 23 of Gus Wasson. Row number 2 finds the 48 of Charlie Fisher and the 92 of Kenny Jacobs. Chris Gurley on the inside of row number 3. Outside of him, the 1Z of Danny Lasoski. And Adam Schmidt in car number 12S. And Dave Freed in the 8F. Make up row number 4. Butch Schroeder, scheduled to start on the inside of row number 2, is a scratch for this heat race. Field begins to pick up the pace now, approaching the stripe. The green flag flies. Heat race number 2 is underway. Dale Blaney out to the early lead. Here comes Kenny Jacobs on the inside of the track, battling Gus Wasson for second. Down the back straightaway they go. It's Blaney, Wasson, Kenny Jacobs to the inside now, challenging for second. Cannot get it there. Let's see what happens in 1 and 2. Still side by side off the corner and down the backstretch. Kenny Jacobs gets the position. It's Dale Blaney, Kenny Jacobs, Gus Wasson, Danny Lasoski runs fourth. The fifth and final transfer spot belongs to the 48 of Charlie Fisher. Lasoski now closes in on Gus Wasson, the battle for third. Lasoski on the inside of the speedway, side by side now down the front straightaway and into turn number 1. Danny Lasoski puts the Chris Black 1Z into third. Kenny Jacobs now moving up to challenge race leader Dale Blaney. Battle for the lead in heat race number 2 through turns 1 and 2, side by side. Dale Blaney hangs on down the back straightaway. Jacobs again to the inside of Blaney down the front straightaway. Jacobs will lead at the stripe. Kenny Jacobs puts the Ashworth 92 into the lead of the second heat race. Dale Blaney running second. Danny Lasoski third. Charlie Fisher fourth. Gus Wasson holds down the fifth and final transfer spot. Danny Lasoski in the 1Z, gaining ground on second place, running Dale Blaney as the white flag flies. Lasoski tries the bottom of 1 and 2, cannot make the move there. Off of corner number 4, the win of the heat race goes to Kenny Jacobs. Dale Blaney holds on for second, Danny Lasoski third, Charlie Fisher fourth. Gus Wasson takes the fifth and final transfer spot, followed by Chris Gurley and Adam Schmidt. Kevin Huntley in car number 78 sits on the pole for heat race number 3. Outside of him, the 99 of Todd Kane. Art Wendt in 77W and Byron Reed in the 5 make up row number 2. Joey Saldana is on the inside of row 3 with Frankie Kerr in the 23S outside of him. Jason Statler from California in the 00 on the inside of row number 4. Alongside of him, the 13 of Jeremy Minton. And rounding out the field, the 1C of Charlie Baker. Looks like we've got a scratch in this heat race. That would be the 13 of Jeremy Minton. Off of corner number 4, the green flag flies and Kevin Huntley jumps out to the lead of heat race number 3. Todd Kane follows him in second. Byron Reed battling Joey Saldana for third down the back straightaway. Saldana moves to the inside, trying to slide up in front of Byron Reed to take third. Saldana working the bottom of the speedway, gaining ground on second place, running Todd Kane. Now to the inside and sliding up in front, Joey Saldana puts the Brad Gray number 51 into second. It's Kevin Huntley in front, followed by Joey Saldana, Todd Kane, Byron Reed, and Frankie Kerr in the fifth and final transfer spot. Now Kerr looks to the inside of Byron Reed, exiting corner number 4, and the 23S moves into fourth. Joey Saldana with a very close brush with the wall entering turn number 3. Still keeps the 51 on line. Meanwhile, Frankie Kerr looks to the inside of Todd Kane for third. Joey Saldana closing in on leader Kevin Huntley as they cross the flag stand. Saldana looks to the inside, can't get it done, exiting corner number 2. Same thing with Frankie Kerr and Todd Kane. Now Saldana pulls alongside of Kevin Huntley. Down the front straightaway they go side by side, and into corner number 1, new heat race leader is Joey Saldana. White flag waves this time by for the Brownsburg, Indiana driver out in front of heat race number 3. Art Wendt trying to close on the fifth and final transfer spot held by Byron Reed, but at the checkered flag, the winner is Joey Saldana. Kevin Huntley comes home second, Frankie Kerr third. Fourth spot to Todd Kane, and the fifth and final transfer spot goes to the 5R of Byron Reed. Art Wendt finishes 6th, Jason Statler 7th, and Charlie Baker comes home 8th. Joey Saldana in Brad Gray's Stealth Chassis number 51 picks up the win in heat race number 3. Dan Coggshell in car number 3C sits on the pole for heat race number 4. Outside of him, the 48J of James Fisher. Tim Shaffer in the 55 and Paul McMahan in the 75 make up row 2. Keith Kauffman in the U2 and Joe Gaerte in the 3G. Then it's the 2A of Bobby Adamson, the 63 of Jack Hewitt. Green flag is waving. Dan Coggshell out to the early lead. Look at Tim Shaffer on the bottom of the speedway move up into second. Paul McMahan holds down third. Keith Kauffman is fourth, and James Fisher is in fifth. McMahan now on the inside of the speedway trying to take second from Tim Shaffer. They're side by side as they approach the race leaders. Some smoke from Dan Coggshell's machine. McMahan goes into the lead. Keith Kauffman follows. Coggshell is off the pace. Off of corner number 4, Paul McMahan controls the race. Keith Kauffman second, Tim Shaffer third, Joe Gaerte fourth. The fifth and final transfer spot belongs to the 48J of James Fisher. Joe Gaerte now looks to the inside of Tim Shaffer through corners 3 and 4. Down the front straightaway, Joe Gaerte puts the contractor instruments 3G into third. Shaffer tries to drive back on the inside, but he can't get it done in 1 and 2. Paul McMahan over Keith Kauffman, Joe Gaerte, Tim Shaffer, and James Fisher. Bobby Adamson runs 6th, Jack Hewitt in 7th. Battle for the final transfer spot now. Bobby Adamson comes up to challenge James Fisher. Fisher working the bottom side of the speedway. Adamson goes up to the cushion. Paul McMahan is way out in front. Here comes Adamson up to challenge Fisher one more time for the final transfer spot. White flag waves for the Mopar number 75, driven by Paul McMahan. Bobby Adamson with another run at the final transfer spot, held by James Fisher into 1 and 2. Off of corner number 4, Paul McMahan picks up the win in heat race number 4. Keith Kauffman brings the U2 home 2nd, Joe Gaerte 3rd, 4th spot to Tim Shaffer, and the 5th and final transfer spot goes to the 48J of James Fisher. Bobby Adamson rounds out the field in car number 2A. So it's the Mopar 75 of California's Paul McMahan picking up the win in the 4th and final heat race for the Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions. We've qualified 20 drivers to the 30-lap A main. The Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions sprint cars lined up in their traditional 4-wide salute to the fans, looking for 30 laps of green flag racing here at Eldora Speedway, night number 2 of the historical big one, the 5th annual. A feature lineup looks like this. Joe Gaerte in car number 3G starts on the pole. Outside of him, the 23S of Frankie Kerr. Danny Lasoski in the car number 1Z is on the inside of row number 2. Outside of him, tonight's fast qualifier, the 1F of Dean Jacobs. Tyler Walker in car number 35 is on the inside of row 3. Outside of him, the 48 of Charlie Fisher. Joey Saldana and Keith Kauffman, the 51 and the U2, make up row number 4. Lee Brewer in the 2D and Kenny Jacobs in the 92 are row number 5. Byron Reed in car number 5 is on the inside of row 6. Outside of him, the 75 of Paul McMahan. Tim Shaffer in car number 55 is on the inside of row 7. Outside of him, the 77 of Art Wendt. Gus Wasson in 23 and Danny Smith in number 4 make up row number 8. James Fisher starts 17th in 48J. Todd Kane starts 18th in the 99. Kevin Huntley's on the inside of row 10 in the 7. Outside of him, the 94 of Dale Blaney. Row number 11 finds the 3B of Chris Gurley and the 11 of Tim Allison. And the 12th and final row consists of the 12S of Adam Schmidt and the 63 of Jack Hewitt. Joe Gaerte and Frankie Kerr lead the field down into turn 3 now. Look for a green flag at the chalk stripe in turn number 4. 30 laps of Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions sprint car racing. Green flag waves. Frankie Kerr leads the field down the front stretch and into turn number 1. Dean Jacobs moving up on the inside. Red flag, we've got a trouble on the front straightaway. Chris Gurley is the car upside down. We can see the remains of the DuPont 3B driven by Chris Gurley involved in a front straightaway flip as the original green flag came out. Chris got out of the car a little woozy, took a ride in the ambulance just to be on the safe side. Possible slight concussion for the Elkhart, Indiana driver. But the field is lined up back 2 by 2 and we'll look for a start again this time coming out of turn number 4. Joe Gaerte and Frankie Kerr in row 1, Danny Lasoski and Dean Jacobs in row 2, Tyler Walker and Charlie Fisher in row 3, Joey Saldana and Keith Kauffman in row 4, Lee Brewer and Kenny Jacobs in row number 5. Field picks up the pace now, the green flag flies. Joe Gaerte out to the early lead. Here comes Danny Lasoski working the bottom side of the speedway. He's up into 2nd. Frankie Kerr holds down 3rd. Dean Jacobs 4th as they enter turns 3 and 4. Lasoski on the bottom side of the speedway. Joe Gaerte leads lap number 1. Danny Lasoski 2nd. Lasoski closing in on the Gaerte engines. 3G down the back straightaway they go. Lasoski dives to the bottom of 3 and 4, trying to slide up in front of Joe Gaerte. Can't do it that time by. Side by side again into turns 1 and 2. The dude from Dover looking to take command of the Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions A main. Goes to the inside entering turn 3 and makes the pass stick. Frankie Kerr still holds down 3rd. Tyler Walker 4th. Dean Jacobs runs 5th as the field enters 1 and 2. Kerr working the bottom. Dean Jacobs up towards the middle of the field. Lasoski with a half a straightaway lead now. Frankie Kerr running in the third spot. Tyler Walker running fourth, working the bottom side of the speedway as Frankie Kerr drives the Show 23S around the cushion. The 1996 Rookie of the Year for the National Sprint Car Poll, hoping to close the distance. Leader Danny Lasoski approaching lap traffic now. The 12S of Adam Schmidt, the first car in his path. Lasoski goes to the top side, entering turn number 1 and puts Adam Schmidt 1 lap down. We've got a trouble on the back straightaway. A car slowing over there. Yellow flag should be coming out. Byron Reed, the driver of the Rebar 5R. The car stopped on the back straightaway. Danny Lasoski in command of the Frigidaire All-Star A main at Eldora, 6 laps down, 24 laps remaining. Joe Gaerte holds on to second, Frankie Kerr third, Tyler Walker fourth, and Dean Jacobs rounds off the top 5. The green flag is waving once again. Lasoski holding on to the lead. Here comes Frankie Kerr around Joe Gaerte to take second. Kerr with a move on the outside of the speedway as the field came down the front stretch. Second spot to the driver from Fremont, Ohio. Gaerte's third, Tyler Walker fourth, and Dean Jacobs hounding him for fifth. Here comes Joey Saldana on the bottom of the speedway trying to challenge Dean Jacobs for the 5th spot. Saldana on the bottom now trying to slide up in front. Jacobs nearly catches the wall exiting turn number 2. Saldana has 5th. He's looking to take 4th from Tyler Walker. Down low entering turn 1 and 2, sliding up in front. The Brownsburg, Indiana driver takes 4th away from Tyler Walker. Now sets his sights on Joe Gaerte. Joey Saldana in the Brad Gray Motorsports number 51 making progress on the bottom of the speedway now. Through 3 and 4, gets a little loose coming out of turn number 4. That lets Gaerte gain an extra couple of car lengths. The field heads down the back straightaway. It's Lasoski, Frankie Kerr, Joe Gaerte. Gaerte closing right back in on Frankie Kerr, looking to gain that second position back. Lap traffic ahead for race leader Danny Lasoski, the 12S of Adam Schmidt, about to go a lap down to the dude from Dover. More than a straightaway separating race leader Lasoski from second place running Joe Gaerte, as Gaerte has just made an inside move on Frankie Kerr. Once again, a car slowing on the back straightaway, pulling into the pit area. Gaerte in the second position, trying to reel in race leader Danny Lasoski. Lasoski putting the crisp black number 1Z right around the top side of the Eldora Speedway, puts Charlie Fisher 1 lap down. Gaerte holds on to second, Frankie Kerr third, 4th spot to Joey Saldana, Dean Jacobs holds on to 5th. Jacobs in the Frigidaire 1F trying to gain ground on the Brownsburg, Indiana driver of the Brad Gray 51. Saldana, meanwhile, makes the low move on Frankie Kerr, slides up in front, and Joey Saldana has moved into 3rd. Now Dean Jacobs is going to try the bottom of the speedway. He wants to take 4th from the current All-Star points leader. Back up to the top in 3 and 4. Frankie Kerr working right around the middle. Dean Jacobs goes side by side with Kerr entering turn number 1. Back up to the cushion for Dean Jacobs, and he's got 4th. Jacobs now in the Ashworth 92 uses the bottom move to get around Frankie Kerr. Kenny has moved up behind Brother Dean, and Kenny Jacobs sits 5th. Frankie Kerr is back to 6th. Dean Jacobs trying a bottom move on Joey Saldana as race leader Danny Lasoski continues to work heavy traffic. Lasoski still working on the 48 of Fisher. Joe Gaerte is closed right in on the dude's tail. We're going to have a battle for the lead up in front very, very shortly. Lasoski and Gaerte checking out on the rest of the field. Joey Saldana third, Dean Jacobs fourth, and Kenny Jacobs still running the bottom and running the fifth position. Now Dean Jacobs makes an inside move, slides up in front of the 51, and the Frigidaire 1F takes over the third spot. Saldana tries to drive right back underneath him down the back straightaway and into 3 and 4. Battle for the lead, meanwhile, up front, Joe Gaerte makes an inside move, tries to get by Danny Lasoski. Gaerte on the bottom, Lasoski in the middle of the track. Joe Gaerte puts the Contractor Instruments 3G out into the lead. Joe Gaerte looking to pick up his first A-main victory of any kind during the 1997 season. He's a former All-Star Circuit of Champions point champion. He's got about 7 car lengths now. Gaerte working the top side of the speedway, heads past the start-finish line. Kenny Jacobs is moving in on Danny Lasoski, and it looks like the battle will be shaping up for the second spot. Jacobs in the Ashworth 92, closing on the dude from Dover. Jacobs working the bottom of the speedway. Lasoski still right out in the middle. Now both cars take to the high side of 1 and 2. We've got a yellow flag. Kieth Kauffman in the United Express line number U2 has come to a stop exiting corner number 2, bringing out the second yellow flag of the event. A 4-lap shootout for the A-main victory with the Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions. Joe Gaerte leads it. Danny Lasoski back in second. Kenny Jacobs third. Dean Jacobs fourth, and Charlie Fisher fifth as the green flag falls. Look at Kenny Jacobs on the bottom of the speedway going side by side with Danny Lasoski. Dean Jacobs sticks his nose in there as well, and Charlie Fisher working the bottom of the speedway. Charlie Fisher now on the bottom goes by Dean Jacobs, now by Danny Lasoski as well, and Fisher is up to third. Dean Jacobs in the Frigidaire 1F works the top side of the speedway, tries to go around Danny Lasoski. They're side by side in 1 and 2. Now off of the corner, Dean Jacobs is up to fourth. Joey Saldana in the 51 comes into fifth. Saldana working the middle. Dean Jacobs working the top of the speedway. Lasoski still trying to hang in there as well. Now Saldana on the bottom, side by side with Dean Jacobs, but he can't keep up the momentum exiting corner number 2. Lasoski goes back on the top side of the speedway. Saldana will have none of that. Now Lasoski diamonds off the corner, drives around Saldana down the front stretch. In the 1 and 2, Saldana and Lasoski side by side. Lasoski with the momentum. Checkered flag will be waving this time around. Joe Gaerte picks up the A-main win right at the line. Charlie Fisher gets second. Kenny Jacobs third. Dean Jacobs fourth. Danny Lasoski fifth, and Joey Saldana has to settle for sixth. Joe Gaerte picks up his first A-main victory of the 1997 season here with the Frigidaire All-Star Circuit of Champions. So the Contractor Instruments Redline Oil Gaerte Engines 3G is headed to victory lane here at Eldora, night number 2 leading up to the 5th annual historical Big One. Joe Gaerte, your first A-main win of the 1997 season. A great warm-up for the 100,000 win race coming up in a couple of days.
Yeah, we just kind of come over here. We just kind of finished this motor up in this afternoon, and we wasn't real sure if we was coming or wasn't coming, and we decided to come at the last minute. And